Good morning and welcome to another Account-Based Friday. Actually, it's good afternoon because we've got a special guest, Dorothea, joining us from Germany today, and it's afternoon her time. Meg's going to give a proper introduction in a moment. Let me orient you around before we get kicked off here. In the upper corner, as you're looking at the screen, you'll see a QR code. That QR code gives you access to 200 plus best practice videos of go-to-market motions, including account-based, of sales and marketing leaders. So we would encourage you to click on that. If you have a specific question, you could do one of two things. Either today, you can actually ask in the comments and we promote it up into the comments. So this is as much of your presentation as it is ours. Or if you have a specific question that is not covered and you don't have time to go through the videos, you can certainly pop those questions over to us as well, and we can orient you to the best video to take a look at. Our format, each week we start off with a poll, and this week being no different. And I was pretty intentional on this poll because I felt, given Dorothea's background, which you'll learn more about in a moment, it was suited for perhaps what she's seeing and what she's focused on a little bit more than perhaps us in the US might be focused on. And that's on the resourcing side of ABM. Now, I just did a LinkedIn search. There's over 120,000 LinkedIn titles that include account-based. So there's a lot of you out there that are probably dedicated to the role, but quantity 11, not a lot of people. Generally speaking, over half were either in a situation of shared headcount or no headcount for an ABX or ABM initiative. I know this has morphed over time. Meg, what was your point of view on this one out of curiosity?
I see a lot of shared headcount. So companies that, in particular, if they're just on the early stage of getting into account-based work, they'll bring people in from their existing marketing organization and let them try it out until such time as it gets big enough or necessary enough that there does need to be dedicated headcount. Or if, in fact, you end up just morphing your team to an account-based team, because that's all right. That's the right focus for you. But enough for me, because we are very lucky to have Dorothea with us today. Dorothea is a longtime part of the ABM community, one of the earliest adopters, and one of the most successful as well. I was able to see her win the prestigious Serious Decisions ROI Award for the impact that she had in a past role. Really incredible work and outcomes. And she is now part of Inflexion Group and the founder of her company, Gosling and Friends, where she assists organizations who want to deploy account-based programs of all kinds. But in particular, she is helping them take sales and marketing technology, kind of bringing those parts together and those teams together with a focus on pursuit-based marketing or deal-based marketing, which is a subset of account-based that says, how do we win must-win deals? How do we get into the accounts we most want to engage? And Dorothea, I'm so happy you're here to share your knowledge and wisdom, because I don't think enough people go down this road. But before we jump in, would love for you to tell us, what is pursuit marketing or deal-based marketing? Tell us what that is and how it fits into the ABM spectrum.
Cool. Well, thank you. First of all, thank you so much, Meg and John, to give me the opportunity to speak with you about one of my favorite subjects, and to also hopefully tell your audience a little about it and get them as excited about ABM, but particularly deal-based marketing or pursuit marketing, as I like to call it, as I am. So in a nutshell, what it is, you are bringing the best of marketing and sales, and usually your solutioning teams, because in pursuit marketing, you're looking at large deals, very strategic deals that help maybe move the needle for your company or help you land really important new logos that you need in order to expand into other markets or other segments. And you really bring the best of all the teams together for that single purpose, to switch propensity or increase the propensity for your company to win. And ultimately, if you do it at a program level, do it repeatedly, you want to up your win rate.
Yeah. And Dorothea, I should have asked, what are your thoughts on this poll, especially as it relates to what you've just described?
Well, it's not really a surprise. What's nice to see is that actually 18% do have dedicated ABX headcount. I think that's a big shift from when I first started out. I mean, I know I'm kind of spearheading pursuit marketing now, but in my previous company, when I started ABM in 2004, there was a business development team that had marketers in it, but that got disbanded as part of some not so smart, in my view, head cuts. And I kind of squirreled it back up and said, actually, this is really good. You should do this. So I think the statistics is really cool. The shared headcount is actually more than I had expected for ABX. So there's definitely a big shift from when I started out to now, and it has bubbled up.
Just thinking about where you're based in Germany, and we were kidding around earlier. We were talking about food, my favorite topic, which we'll have a separate podcast on later on. But thinking about your experiences since you've been doing ABM so long, it's over 20 years here, what differences do you see between Europe and that of the US in an ABM approach? Just, given your, where you're sitting right now.
Mm-hmm. So the biggest difference, I think, is in the roots of the ABM initiatives in each region. In Europe, we started out with strategic ABM one-to-one. So in my past, when I spent 9 years on an account, it was a very large account, several hundred million worth of annual revenue for the company. At some time, I had up to 9 staff dedicated to me in various regions. That doesn't really happen so much anymore because the deal size has gone smaller, but this focus on one-to-one, highly customized, highly personal ABM is still predominant, although I see that change. Whereas in the US, I mean, ABM, I think, burst on the market. Am I allowed to name companies here? I think
Sure, as long as it's not going to get you in trouble.
No, I don't think so. I think demand-based kind of brought it on the map, Chris Golek, with that product, which I, at the time, I mean, we used it where I was, but for me, it was just advertising to accounts. But it really helped create that segment and that mind share in the US. But it was still going after lots of accounts with high automation, and there wasn't this high touch, true personalization possible that we've been doing in Europe. And what I see now is it's starting to merge. In the US, we're helping companies set up these more higher touch engagements with ABX, and Europe is starting to warm to technology as that technology is becoming better and allows for more meaningful personalization. So it's interesting.
And Dorothea, you've been in both global and regional roles.
Mm-hmm.
What is your advice in terms of how those in global roles can be actually helpful and not annoying to their regional counterparts?
I know what you mean. I think that the key in a global role is to provide maybe guardrails. So my COE was an enablement function, and my team would fly in, not fly in literally, but we would partner on pursuits. We were saving money. We were partner, for example, on pursuits with teams in the regions and added skills and processes to the skills they already had. And I think that's a key thing, and also to understand that regardless of where your global headquarter is, you have a cultural bias. And to understand that what works in Germany, what works in the UK, or what works in the US does not translate one-to-one into the other regions, let alone into an Asian market. So be really open about that, learn about the markets, and then work with your regional teams and help provide the guardrails, the process frameworks, but listen to them, especially when it comes to cultural issues and how to do things.
I think that's such an excellent point. Back in my CMO career, one of my CMO assignments, I was in Luxembourg for a fair amount of time in a Luxembourg headquarters company working as the head of marketing in the US. And I would imagine if you flip that model, if you're in Europe working for a US headquarter company, you may have seen the inverse. But I noticed that trust, not learning the culture, I violently agree, but developing that trust seemed to be really a critical ingredient, because without it, it was like, well, the Germans are doing one thing and the US are being cowboys and doing another thing. Any advice, or have you ever seen that situation? It could be just unique to my one experience there where I was going back and forth, but any advice on what to build that trust and cultural understanding, as you mentioned?
I think you're spot on. I've been in it from all sorts of angles. I think the best way to establish trust between teams is the way we establish it between others. Look each other in the eye, actually listen actively, Don't dismiss a different point of view from a regional team or from a global team just because they are regional or global. And ultimately, establish a clear focus on outcomes. What is it you want to achieve together? And then through process, you'll hear me say process and frameworks, but deliver on what you said you're going to deliver. And I think, and if you say you give someone freedom to do something, let them do it. If that goes wrong, they learn, then that trust again is strengthened. And trust is really about delivering on what you say you do, be authentic, and be fair.
Yeah. Well, and in particular, in the context of pursuit marketing, I think that trust to say what is the best thing to do based on who we're trying to engage and what we want to accomplish. So actually trust and focused on those outcomes is really key. But what would you say, when you're first beginning to work on a large deal and you're bringing marketing and sales together, probably for the first time, what are some of the things that you do to begin that process?
Well, the first is to understand what the deal is about. So if I go back to my old world, and when it was mature, we actually had a process to vet deals together with the head of strategic sales. But in the early days, as a marketer, it helps if you have business acumen. If you don't understand business very well, you might not want to start with pursuit marketing. So look at this very, very soberly. Also vet the salesperson. Not every salesperson is a good sparring partner for marketing. They may be brilliant salespeople, but if it's one of those lone wolves, don't bother. Find someone in sales who wants to work with marketing, respects you, and then rally around with them around the customer. Start with the customer needs, and can we serve those needs? If we can't serve those needs, again, that might not be a good strategic deal. But once you have established that, then deeply understand how the deal process works, because there are times at which you're not supposed to do certain things, and that can get you into deep water. And create that really close relationship with a strategic deal exec, and ideally also with, usually on those large deals, you have a bid director or a bid manager. And those two are going to be your best buddies, along with some solution architects. Listen, be respectful, and don't use marketing jargon. This is a business thing, and you need to have business language to also make them understand how and why you're adding value.
Yeah, I love that business language perspective. I think all of us could infuse that anywhere globally and would have a lot of success in this environment. And thinking about your pursuit marketing and kind of your European experience, and also thinking back to my own experience, even prior to the Luxembourg assignment, another CMO assignment, where I was responsible for European marketing. In that particular instance, I noticed the go-to-market motion. It was a SaaS IT-based product. Partners were more heavily emphasized in Europe than that of the US, either sell-through partners or referral partners. It's probably not a one size fits all, but do you treat partners differently in pursuit marketing or any ABM in Europe, that you've seen any differently than the US from your perspective?
So maybe I've worked with US companies, so I'm not sure if my lens is truly European, but I think it varies a little from partner to partner. You've got partners that are frenemies. Think of Big Blue. They might be competing for a deal with you, while at the same time, my background is in IT services. We might be using them to kit out a data center. So I think that's always quite delicate. If you have a really good pursuit team where partners are involved, you will strategize together. And the route, and as you do, so executive stakeholder mapping is really important. And as you look for the route to influence the right executives in a really well-functioning team, you will go the route that is the best, regardless of whether it's your company or your partners, but you try and equip them with the best possible pitch and material for the joint effort.
And thinking about the joint effort, I think one of the challenges that marketers often run into is when they're working with sales, they would say, great, I'm going to help you with this deal. What would you like me to do? And you'll get some typical answers, because it's not really fair to expect that sales speaks marketing and vice versa. So although we're getting better, but still, what are some of the tactics that in your experience sales doesn't ask for, but that actually end up being very effective in pursuit marketing?
Oh, that's a really good question. So we actually onboarded sales to give them idea of the art of the possible because of that. Um, Again, that varies actually from salesperson to salesperson. Some really are clued up, surprisingly also about digital tactics. Others not so. So what I like to do is look at them, what the deal timeline is, where people are located, where the various big events are happening and when, and then look at how, from a marketing perspective, we can influence that. That's kind of the one thing. The other whole line is around establishing win themes. I mean, that's something some sellers are really good at that, others not so hot. I mean, one sales team once sent me 5 words that was their win theme. So I made up 5 random sentences and said, so is that what you thought? And so helping sales really refine their win theme, creating a messaging hierarchy. I think that's a really big thing. Storytelling. Some salespeople can do it, others not. So if you're good at storytelling, help them tell that story and help the entire deal team tell that story, because they talk to different audiences. And each of them having a story for their counterpart, take the CFO, the CIO, others. But if that all ties back to that win theme, that's a massive, massive improvement on your odds. And then, of course, as marketers, there are those classic digital or analog surrounds that we can do, particularly during phases. So deals have what are called quiet phases. That's just before decision points, during the negotiating phase. You're not allowed normally for those big deals to contact anyone in the client organization. But as a marketer, there's nothing stopping you from putting some handy posters up anywhere near where they're commuting from, or using digital surround. So there are things you can actually do as a marketer that kind of fill the void when your sales team has no contact to that client or that buying center.
Yeah, I love your concept of seller themes. I may hijack that one because I think that's a great great pillar to kind of focus on and improve, because then everybody's kind of focused on a common goal.
Mhm.
You said something really interesting there about the posters on the commute and the digital surround. You're outside in the U.S. looking in to
Mhm.
Europe. I would imagine you're at the epicenter of data privacy and
Mhm.
AI regulations too. You're
Mhm.
really at the tip of the spear, or at least that's our perception, or my perception, going into Europe. What are you noticing there with data privacy and even AI regulations that's either a headwind or a tailwind for your efforts in
Mm.
pursuit marketing?
That's a really good question, very topical. I think in AI, the regulation is not a bad thing, to be honest, because I think it's happened in the US, it's happening in Europe, where there's more political, but it can translate to marketing. It's a form of marketing, just not a very nice one. You can literally create bubbles around people that change their perception, and you can use that for good or for bad. And the market's decision is to use it for good. So don't use it if you're trying to sell something to someone that really isn't going to work, because that's also a long time bad for your company. But the other thing, I think it makes you creative. It makes you think. So GDPR, well, you have to find other ways of getting in front of people. And to use an example from my past, it was we were after an infrastructure deal with a big car manufacturer in Germany. We ended up hiring an electric car, wrap it in our livery with something relevant for the deal, and park it up. So our salespeople rocked up in that thing every time. It was, of course, a car of their make, and parked it pretty much outside the CIO's office, much to the disgust of our competitors. So there are things you can do that are creative, and they make you stand out, because you want to stand out in a good way. So yeah, I'm not sure if that totally answered your question.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Dorothea. I think privacy regulations make us better marketers, because we aren't leaning on the opportunity to reach out to people who haven't indicated any interest in talking to us in an intrusive way. We have to do it in another way, and hopefully help them find us. So I'm with you there. Kind of thinking again about sort of the balance of a pursuit marketing plan versus an overall account plan.
Mhm.
How do those things work together? And at what point do you bring in a pursuit? At what point in account planning do you consider whether or not there might also be a need for a specific deal pursuit plan?
That's a really good question. So account planning is something you strategically should do at least once a year, and then not leave it in a drawer or a virtual filing cabinet. And during that time, you really need to identify what are the big boulders you want to lift and need to shift in that fiscal year, or maybe in the next 2 to 3 fiscal years. And some of the big ones could be, and going back to my history in IT services, they're big renewals, i.e. a contract you don't want to lose. Some announcements from the client that they are looking at outsourcing something or sourcing something that you want to get, or when you see a competitor fail, that you say, okay, we want to do a competitive takeout. And I mentioned it earlier, if you're trying to get into a new market with in a particular account, you say, okay, we really want to win this one logo, then it's also a good idea to do it. But it has to be, they have to be the big ticket items, because the effort to do that is of course higher. I was on deals that lasted 18 months, not full time, but that was a share of my time for 18 months, and of course other resources. So you don't do it lightheartedly. And to your point earlier, I think, Megan, your point about sales comes to me and says, I want, that is good on the one hand, but then you want to help your salespeople understand there's more than just a billboard or, I don't know, a pretty PowerPoint. And it's a great opportunity to really then strategize together at those things, make it more proactive and strategic rather than transactional.
Yeah, just building on that pursuit marketing kind of concept of really focusing in on one client and going all after it and going all in. I think in one of our pre-call conversations, in our informal discussion, we were talking about at one point intent data, and I was suggesting, like in the US, hey, you got this intent data and it does this and it does that, and you kind of looked at me like, I'm not so sure that's really needed in this particular case. Maybe whether it's intent or any technology, what technologies do you feel like are supporting that strategy of pursuit marketing, maybe better or worse, like intent as an example?
That's a good point. Maybe not so much intent data, third party, first party intent, or first party data. Let's look at it that way. First party data is great, because if you have a campaign, or sometimes even, if you think about as a marketer, what could I look for that actually signals that something might be happening? If you look at your own website and suddenly people start looking at your investor relation page from one company, you've got this spike, and in your investor relations, and there is not an announcement, you don't have results calls, there's no investor day, that is a really good sign. So your first question is to the delivery lead, saying, are we having any problems delivering? And could there be a problem with our contracts here? And if that is a resounding absolutely not, you think, well, in that case, they might be looking at a sourcing initiative. You could want to talk to these people. So I think here it might be an early signal. And then later you can, of course, if you can use digital surround, you can use the signals the net sends you to target your advertising as and when people are active in a certain area, and really steer that to a pinpoint accuracy. So I see it more of a use case in ABM, in the classic account-based marketing, or in the classic sales motion, kind of an ongoing thing, not so much in pursuit.
I suppose at that point, if you are investing in the pursuit, the intent's pretty clear.
There is that. It's like, there is a deal. We want to win it.
Indeed. So yes, I can understand intent, but I think there are other ways to use it. If you have it, you might as well tap into it for signals you might not be getting.
Exactly, especially if you can make it work. I think the biggest challenge that people have with intent data is that they in part don't feed the engines well enough. I think for intent data to really work, you as the company sourcing the intent data needs to really be able to attribute and label the data points well. And that in the language of the customers, not your own buzzwords, in the customer language. And a lot of companies don't get that right and then complain, oh, the intent data isn't working. I don't know what 75 means. Well, of course you don't, because you haven't put the work up front. But that's a different discussion.
And a good one to have too. I've definitely run across that same challenge of, it's there, but what in the world do you do with it? But a different question, and you can say if you don't want to answer this, but sometimes you don't win big deals in spite of your absolutely fabulous marketing and best efforts. It doesn't work.
Yep.
What happens then? What's the messaging internally if you've made this investment and everyone's sort of disappointed? What's the way for marketing to still find some rays of light out of that experience?
Well, you can learn something out of everything. And we would have, if a company loses a deal that size, there is a win-loss, or there's a loss review in that instance. And you can find out what went wrong. Was it messaging? Was it something marketing did or didn't do? Usually it's not marketing, but you can learn something to inform your marketing strategy going forward. And the other thing we always used to do, and you might remember that from that presentation we had up there in Vegas that day on the stage, we used to do. I used to poll the sales teams after our pursuits, and regardless of whether we won or lost, the score for marketing was really high because they saw marketing was bringing their best game. We really cared. We had skin in the game, and we helped them do better than they would have done on their own. So, yeah, nobody likes losing, but it still builds the trust and the relationship with the sales team. And the next time you try again.
That's excellent. Was that I can't remember, in Las Vegas, was that Lake Las Vegas? The
2017.
No, it was the big show.
Oh, it was real Vegas.
Thousands of people.
Yes, that was scary.
Well, it wasn't the Bellagio. It was the other nice
Venetian.
place. Venetian, yeah, it was another nice place. I remember the nice place part. I can't remember yesterday, but I can remember the Venetian in 2017. I don't know how that works, but
it's my first and only trip to Vegas. So.
Quite. That's how we're all in the U.S. It's just like Vegas, so it's just crazy here. But and I guess just looking at time here, just my last question on this side, and this has been an awesome conversation, Dorothea. I'm so grateful that you invested your time this afternoon to spend with us. If you had to give one piece of actionable advice to perhaps somebody new to a global role, taking over an account-based strategy, what advice would you offer to that person?
Ooh, I think the first piece of advice is don't be daunted, and network. There'll be promoters, there'll be detractors. Find the promoters, network, listen to your regions, and get a really good grip of the accounts, because you don't want to take a list from someone. You want to be able to qualify the accounts in according to criteria that make sense for your business. That was more than one. Sorry.
That's excellent advice. I think account-based programs live and die by their ability to include the right accounts. And like you said, also listening to the people within your organization and to your customers always makes the biggest difference. So thank you, Dorothea. I feel like we've barely scratched the surface of all of the amazing things that you've done and all of your knowledge. I hope you'll join us again. And in the meantime, too, Dorothea is great about sharing her knowledge on LinkedIn. So I encourage everybody to follow her work and pay attention, because she knows what she's talking about.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been fun.
Dorothea, really grateful. And next week, Meg, we've got one of your special guests joining us. You want to give a quick snippet there?
We do indeed. A European name. However, he is not based in Europe at the moment, but Jaap Westrick was a former colleague when both of us worked at Winning by Design. And he is working on helping companies go-to-market functions coordinate with their finance functions for better outcomes all around, including those companies that are heading towards particular exits, whether that's pre-IPO, looking for M&A, looking for private equity. But how do you really get your house in order across finance and into your go-to-market functions? And he's going to be here to share some of that thinking and advice for companies that want to make sure that they're closing that last frontier of alignment within B2B companies.
And Tiffany just chiming in here. This is a great session. So thank you, Tiffany, for hanging on and engaging. And yeah, Meg, just to your point, I was excited about today. I'm equally as excited for next week, because I think as marketers, we don't really embrace the CFO language as much as we could or should. So really looking forward to that. So we'll keep with the European theme, even though he's I think he's in New York now, but should be a really good discussion.
Yes, indeed. Good advice all around. And many thanks again, Dorothea. And we wish everybody a lovely weekend and a happy Friday.
Cool. Thank you so much. Take care.